Part 1. The man walked in at 2 a.m., dragging something black behind him. The way it moved didn't sit right. Neither did he. The receptionists felt it immediately. It was the way he walked, stiff and uneven, like a scarecrow with one leg shorter than the other. He hid greasy blonde hair beneath a 10-gallon hat, spurs clicking as he moved. I watched the security footage later. His lips were white and thin, his teeth crooked, his mouth twisted into a half-smile like he was seconds from laughter. He was dragging a massive black Rottweiler. The dog resisted, black paws sliding across the floor. The camera didn't pick up sound, but later, the two gals at reception told me what he said.
He's acting possessed.
They handed him intake forms. He hobbled back to a bench. I watched through the camera lens as another client holding a cat carrier slid away from him. I looked up at his paperwork. The address led to some warehouse out in the scrublands 3 states away. The name seemed fake, too. Keaton. No records, no online presence. It didn't seem to fit him. But the dog's name, Mutt. That was the only detail I believed. You might wonder why I checked. It's not standard protocol. I don't usually do this, but the events of the last few nights led me to my search. When he handed the paperwork back, he sat down again, dragging the dog with him like a sack of flour. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, eyes fixed ahead. He moved like a corpse propped upright. His dog didn't move much either. It sat there, waiting. We see a lot of characters here. Some aggressive, some kind. But this man, something about him was wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. I stepped into the lobby to bring him into an exam room. It took him a second to register me, like he was in a trance. And then, the smell hit me. Stale cigarettes, gas fumes, and beneath that, something worse. A rotten, greasy stench that clung to the air. The dog sat still, vacant, a husk. It was like someone had lobotomized him. As it stood there, drool began dripping from its mouth, pooling on the floor. I introduced myself and got to work.
So, what's going on with Mutt today?
Keaton didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted to the ceiling like he was staring at something that fluttered in the air above us.
Oh, he ain't acting right. He ain't been eating much.
This is usually where clients start rambling. Some could go on for hours if you let them. He had decided he'd given me enough information. He sat staring at the ceiling through those dirty locks of hair. When I knelt to take the dog's heart rate, the second my fingers touched its skin, a wrongness crawled into me. That tingle before lightning strikes. That creeping dread when something awful is about to happen. The vitals were normal, the heart rate, breathing, but its skin was cold, and its temperature was 97 degrees, lower than we like. I checked its skin, seeing how dehydrated it was, but when I peeled back its loose lips to check its gums, I felt a jolt of unease, like I was too close to something I shouldn't be. The gums were pale. The pupils locked onto me, dilated. The feeling of unease was sickening.
Don't turn your back on him,
the man said. I paused mid-turn.
Excuse me?
If you're gonna walk from him, do it face him. Otherwise, something bad might happen.
I exhaled, irritated. He'd watched me get close to the dog, lean in, take its temperature, listen to its heart rate. Yet now was the time he decided to warn me it was aggressive. I liked the situation less and less. The man, the dog, the way this whole situation ached in my gut. I backed away, facing the dog. It watched me like I was prey, like I was meat. A few moments later, our on-site emergency veterinarian, Dr. Harkham, came in. Old school, no nonsense. He and Keaton exchanged few words. The vet recommended blood work and an overnight stay with an IV fluid drip. The dog needed warming up too. Keaton never lost that dumb smile, that half-cocked grin, like something was hilarious. But he nodded, accepted the treatment plan. We went to take the dog into the back treatment area. I slipped a muzzle on, of course, and that's when I noticed how the dog refused to walk. The owner had dragged it behind him earlier, but now it wasn't acting lethargic. I could see it in its eyes. It was choosing not to move. It was being obstinate. I had a larger male staff member, Ryan, carry the dog for me. As he picked it up, he glanced at me. We didn't exchange words, but I knew he felt it too. Not only the dog. The air itself seemed to hum with an unearthly feeling. When we went to draw blood from its jugular, it didn't even react. Ryan held the dog steady, hands firm on either side of its head, jaws up. The needle slipped in, the syringe filled. The blood felt lukewarm. It didn't feel like it had been pumping through a live body. I ran it through the machines, and it confirmed mild dehydration with some elevated lipase valves indicating mild pancreatitis. We placed it in a heated kennel, tucked it under blankets, and hooked up the IV catheter. Keaton was gone, but relief was fleeting. Mutt remained, and with him came something unseen. A presence thick as fog, pressing in from all sides. That was 3 days ago. That night was quiet, rare for an emergency hospital. We had another dog kenneled 2 spaces down from the Rottweiler. It was a cattle dog that had undergone emergency laparotomy. It had been doing fine, normal vitals, good appetite, responsive. 2 hours later, I crossed into the back animal ward to check on it. The cattle dog was dead. It had torn open its own incision. The cone lay discarded. It hadn't just licked or nibbled. It had utterly and completely dismantled itself. Even when coils of intestine unfurled from its abdomen, it kept biting at those guts. The dog had attacked his own innards as if they were coiled vipers waiting to lunge. The dog was in a wet slump, head limp against the floor. The blood ran in bright ribbons swirling toward the kennel drain behind him. I heard the gentle slurp of the blood sucking down the drain. The kennel was a bloodbath. It streaked the walls, splattered the ceiling. His intestines had leaked a mixture of bile and digested sludge. The cattle dog's eyes were vacant orbs, glistening in the light. I stood still for a moment, taking in the horror, the scope of this violence. And 2 kennels down sat Mutt, eyes focused on my task, no expression on his stoic face. Fluid drip running, heater humming. There was only the sound of the blood in the pipes. Mutt didn't panic. He didn't whine. His eyes reflected the fluorescent light, and for one sickening second, they looked almost human. Dr. Harkham made the call, but I heard every word, every choked sob through the thin walls of our office. The owner didn't cry. They wailed. I'd seen plenty of death in this job, but this was different. This wasn't bad luck. Something else had its hands in this. The mood in the hospital shifted palpably. In all my years, I'd never seen a dog unzip itself like a gym bag and spill out its intestines. His eyes followed every moment. The bloody towels, the mop buckets, the cattle dog-sized body bag, zip-tied and labeled. That night was quiet, but it didn't feel like a break. I imagined I was in a field, staring at thunderheads form like warships in the distant sky. That feeling was the promise of something worse to come. At some point, hours after the cattle dog's death, I heard the steady beeping of a monitor from the kennel ward. It was the IV pump hooked up to Mutt. I didn't want to go over there, but I did. I brought Ryan. We slipped the muzzle over the Mutt's head. He didn't resist, didn't flinch. He let it happen. His eyes followed the movement of our hands as we buckled it behind his head. Only his eyes moved. 2 dark orbs. He was digesting the scene around him. It felt like he was learning and listening. The dog had kinked the IV line beneath its paw. We moved it aside, smoothed it out. That should have been it. A simple fix. But as we turned to leave, the light above his kennel flickered. It was barely noticeable. Then it sputtered, dimmed, and cut out completely. The kennel dropped into shadow. Ryan and I froze. The only light now was a faint glow from the hallway behind us. We exchanged a glance. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us wanted to acknowledge what we were feeling. The air in the room changed. Heavy, buzzing, like the static before a storm. Then, the 2 tube lights above Mutt's kennel flared so bright it hurt to look at them. A pop, then a sizzle, and they died. Everything was silent. Ryan's back was to Mutt. Mutt lunged. There was a surge of violence, even with the muzzle strapped tight. A blur of black as Mutt's body lunged forward. The muzzled face rammed against Ryan's side, smashing into him again and again. Ryan screamed. The dog was silent, except for the mechanical snapping of his jaws working beneath the muzzle, spittle flying. Ryan twisted, trying to stand, but the sudden attack had taken him off guard. I reacted without thinking, threw open the kennel door. Mutt rammed into Ryan again, harder this time. The sheer force knocked him off balance. Ryan writhed around to grab at Mutt. The moment he faced Mutt, the dog stilled. It stood there, motionless, bathed in the new darkness. Something was wrong with this dog. Not neurologically. It was something so much deeper. I sensed the calculating intelligence of a predator, but it felt much more malignant than that, like a cancerous tumor spreading quietly beneath the surface of your skin. Ryan and I trembled, shaken to the core. Later, he revealed a bruise under his ribs, a deep bloom of violet spreading like a rose beneath his skin. Neither of us spoke about it. The rest of the night passed without incident. I focused on my other cases for the night. I worked with a Chihuahua hacking through pneumonia, a Persian cat with seizures, and a tabby cat with proprioceptive issues in its forelimbs. I went through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere. Ryan seemed dazed, like something fresh had broken inside of him. It wasn't the shock, or the trauma, or the fear. It was more profound than that. I left for the night, still unsettled. Ryan didn't even wave goodbye when I passed by. I chain-smoked cigarettes in my car before driving home, flicked the butts out the window and watched them sail onto the asphalt. My hands were shaking the entire ride. And when I finally collapsed into bed, I pulled my pistol out of my purse and slipped it under my pillow. And as the sun crept over the horizon, my dreams were wrong. I dreamed of a black face snarling in the dark, leaning in, sniffling. Eyes like hollow pits, endless swirling galaxies within. I felt the faraway sting of teeth sinking into my flesh. Not a bite, not an attack, but a slow, deliberate pressure, easing into my skin. When I woke, my sheets were damp with sweat. When I came in for my shift that night, I felt a deep sense of disappointment the second I walked past Mutt's kennel. He was still there, heater purring, eyes following. The lights above his kennel were still blown out. The ones beside them had started to flicker. Ryan called out sick, said he'd been throwing up since the night before. I had a feeling there was more to the story, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. I shot him a text wishing him well. He read it, yet he didn't reply. And that sinister, eerie man who called himself Keaton, his phone went straight to dial tone when we tried calling for a case update. He wasn't coming back. He'd paid half his bill up front in crisp old $100 bills. we weren't getting the other half. The night was busier. I told my manager we shouldn't put any other dogs in that ward, but we didn't have a choice. Our small animal ward was on the other side of the building, but for the larger dogs, they had to go there. We admitted a Great Dane with liver disease. There was nowhere else to put him. So I placed him in the kennel farthest from Mutt, 2 down from the cattle dog that had ripped itself apart. When I went back to check on them 10 minutes later, I stopped cold. Mutt's kennel was wide open. The latch was undone, the door swung open. He wasn't on fluids anymore. Someone must have taken him off. There was no beeping fluid pump, and there was no sign of how the door had opened by itself. This part of the facility was desolate this time of night. Mutt was sitting right at the threshold, slack-jawed and unblinking. I shut the kennel, latched it, then left the room. I returned with 2 plates of food. Immediately, I felt nauseous. The kennel was wide open again. I hadn't heard a sound, hadn't seen the door move. The only way to unlatch these kennels is with hands, with opposable thumbs. I was certain no one had been back here while I grabbed the cans of food. I slammed it shut again, this time locking it with a makeshift carabiner clip. I slid 1 plate of food under each kennel. I gave low-fat wet food for the Dane and critical care wet food for Mutt. I was walking away when I heard it. A sound that froze me. Not a growl, not a whine. It sounded like someone trying to speak while gargling a mouthful of water, like a deep male voice gargling on words before spitting them out. It was the sound of a dog trying to talk. I turned. Mutt sat there, silent now. Something tingled in the air, a musical conductor guiding along an orchestra. Because to my right, the Dane had begun to cry. The Dane was the one making these ungodly noises. The Dane's plate of food lay spilled across the kennel floor, his hackles folded back, the Dane backpedaling until its body pressed against the far wall. I watched the Dane's gaze flicker up toward the ceiling. It became immediately apparent to me that the dog was feeling something, a deeply instinctual and inexplicable something. I knew it was feeling that way, because I felt it too. When I reached for the kennel door, the crying stopped. The Dane's body trembled, then his whimpering changed. It deepened into a low, eerie sound, like a tornado siren, changing in pitch and tone, high to low. Without warning, it stopped altogether. The dog went still, too still, gathering itself back to a normal pose. Then, all at once, the Dane began attacking his own leg. Not chewing, not licking, ripping, breaking. These were deep, pulverizing bites, bone audibly cracked in the echo of the cavernous hallway. Blood spattered the kennel floor. It wasn't a dog in pain. It wasn't a dog in distress. It was something else. This dog was destroying itself with purpose. I couldn't go in there. If I did, he'd likely redirect this aggression onto me. He would send me to the hospital if I tried to intervene. I turned and ran, shouting for help as I sprinted through the clinic. Dr. Harkham and 2 other techs, Angie and Denise, came rushing out of an exam room, the hallway filling with the sound of my frantic screaming. I grabbed a rabies catch pole and beat them back to the kennels. The Dane was still biting, not a rabid and frothing frenzy, but instead an oddly calm and intentional one. The flesh of its leg hung in shredded tatters, tendon, and a suggestion of bone beneath. Blood spurted like pulsing shots from a water gun, in rhythm with its heartbeats. I slipped open the kennel door and looped the catch pole around its neck, tightening it hard. In a wrenching movement, I maneuvered its head enough to stop it from lunging at its own body. It snapped at the air, frantic, without even a hint of pain or emotion behind it. Then it latched onto the metal pole. Not out of panic, not out of rage, out of a bizarre corruption of instinct. The sound was unbearable, teeth breaking against metal, splintering, shattering. The flesh of its leg was gone, a ragged mess of meat exposed to the air that flapped as it chewed at the metal. I saw part of a fractured canine fall out of its mouth. The catch-pole was bloody, dented, but holding firm, withstanding each powerful bite directed at it. The dog was weakening by the time Dr. Harkham arrived, slumping over in the drenched puddle of its own blood. By the time we managed to inject a sedative, it was too late. The blood loss was too severe. The Dane collapsed to the floor, body twitching, biting at the air. It wound down like a toy with dying batteries, its eyes glazing over before going limp. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mutt, lips pulled back in a snarl.
When is that fucking dog going to leave?
I snapped, pointing at him. Dr. Harkham shot me a sharp look. Blood streaked his white coat. His eyes were dark, hollowed with an exhaustion brought on long before Mutt entered our lives.
Something's wrong with it,
I insisted.
with him.
All I see is a dog who mutilated itself in our care and then bled out. Mind you, this is the second one in 2 days. Don't worry about that fucking dog. He gestured at Mutt emphatically. We have bigger issues here. I have another owner to call, another person I have to tell their pet killed itself, under my watch. God, this is a mess. He flicked blood from his fingers, dragging his sleeve across his face. He was years past burnout, a shell of his former self. He couldn't see what I saw. He couldn't see the way Mutt watched, the way his eyes lingered over the carnage pooling beneath my feet. Like he was enjoying it. Dr. Harkham sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. We tried calling that creepy bastard again. Numbers out of service. He ditched the dog on us. That meant we had to rehome it. It could take weeks. I couldn't take weeks with him. None of us could. And as I looked into Angie's eyes, I knew she felt the same. And over the next few hours, the hospital settled into an uneasy silence. The night shift pressed on, but something had shifted. We were all exhausted, hollowed out by what we'd seen. The cattle dog, the Great Dane, the blood, the 2 blood-drenched kennels we'd had to clean up. Mutt still sat in his kennel, untouched food sitting at his feet. The heater hummed in the background. 2 more lights flickered out while I cleaned. I mopped blood from the floors, the thick iron scent clinging to my skin. The mess soaking the towels we used was a deep, ugly red. And through it all, Mutt never looked away from us. A shadow looming in the dark part of this corridor. I told myself I'd figure something out, that I needed time, but time wasn't on my side. I was dumping a load of bloody towels into the laundry bin when I heard it.
I dropped everything. A voice, thick and wet, slurred in a way no dog's throat was built to produce. It wasn't a bark. It wasn't a growl. It was trying to speak. And what came out wasn't a sound. It was a name. My name. Allison.
I turned, stomach lurching. Mutt was sitting in his kennel, still, muzzle slack, drool pooling on the blanket beneath him. His pupils seemed to swallow all the remaining light. I couldn't move. My brain was trying to rationalize it, trying to shove what I had heard into a box of normalcy. Maybe I'd misheard it. Maybe it was the pipes or a monitor. Then the stench of rot hit my nose, like a sniff of smelling salts. It was not the usual smell of the hospital, not the faint antiseptic and animal musk that always clung to the air. This was meat left in the sink for weeks. This was something dead wedged into the unseen cracks of the world. It was a volatile and overpowering scent, consuming anything else in the room. And I realized then that the smell I'd caught when Keaton first walked into the lobby, that greasy, putrid stench,
It hadn't been him. It had been Mutt all along. I felt a desire deep in my core to run. And so I did. I scooped up the blankets off the floor, shoved them into the laundry bin, and bolted. My hands shook as I crammed the lid shut. My pulse was a hammer in my ears. Don't turn your back on him. The memory of Keaton's words crawled down my spine like a cold hand. He's acting possessed. I knew what Mutt had tried to do to Ryan. I knew what he wanted to do to me. And now I knew I wasn't waiting for him to act. I was going to kill him. I kept my head down the rest of the shift, biding my time. My mind wasn't on the cases I took. I worked on autopilot. I went through the motions, but my body was moving without me. And when I got a moment alone, I pulled up 20 milliliters of pentobarbital sodium and phenytoin sodium solution. It's a medication called euthazol. In other words, it's that sparkling pink liquid we in the veterinary field use to put animals down. I drew up enough of the stuff to kill a dog twice Mutt's size. There'd be a discrepancy in the controlled substance log, but I could smooth it out over the next few weeks. A couple of slightly higher doses given on euthanasia cases. If I logged these with enough time between them, I was confident no one would notice. I locked the cabinet, slid the syringe into my pants pocket. By doing this, I was committing a crime, breaking DEA laws. I could lose my license, my career, even end up in jail. But deep in my bones, I knew one thing for certain. That thing in the kennel, whatever it was, it needed to die. The next morning, when I arrived for my shift, the hospital was heavy with grief. Everyone was crying, because it turned out Ryan was dead. He'd taken his own life in his trailer sometime after leaving work. No details, no explanation. He was there one day, then he was gone the next. The police had come by to inform us. They didn't stay long, didn't need to. I knew then. Ryan's death cemented what I had to do in my mind. I couldn't wait until another dog was placed in those kennels, until another staff member was pushed over the edge. So I worked through my grief, through the horror, pushing it all into a place I'd deal with later. I waited for the right moment, a lull between shift changes, when staffing was light. I approached Mutt's kennel. He cocked his head, his eyes tracking my movements. He looked almost expectant. I opened the kennel door and slid the muzzle over his face. My hands moved with a sharpness I hadn't felt before. I yanked the straps too tight, a bit of malice in my actions. My pulse was steady. I held Mutt's paw, feeling for the vein, my other hand already slipping the needle beneath the skin. The syringe in my palm felt hot. I pushed the plunger, forcing the thick pink liquid into his vein. It was a heavy dose, too much for even the largest dog. But I pushed every last drop. Normally, euthanasia is instant. A body slumps, the muscle relaxes, and life fades like a deep exhale. Their eyes stay open, but they flood with vacancy. Mutt didn't move. His chest still rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. His muscles remained locked, rigid. His pupils wide and black, never left mine. This dose should have ended him. This dog should be dead. The hallway lights flickered. One by one, the bulbs sizzled out, plunging the kennel ward into a profound darkness. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of something unseen. The heater shuddered to a stop. The only glow now came from the exit sign at the far end of the hall, casting a weak green wash over the kennels. The shadows seemed to twist and dance around me. I felt adhered to the spot, unable to move. The door to the kennel slammed shut behind me. My breath hitched. The silence was absolute now, only interspersed with the slow, wet rasp of Mutt's breathing. I could feel him in the dark, the weight of his presence gnawing at the air. The voice came from before me, deep into the churning pool of shadows further back into the kennel. A sound like vocal cords cut like strings and hidden beneath a mound of scar tissue. A broken, misshapen mouth trying to shape words, the vowels stretched, dripping with something slick and inhuman. My stomach lurched. I reached for the latch, fingers fumbling, but my hands were slick with sweat. My breathing was too loud. The darkness pressed in. The rot smell thickened, crawling up my throat. Then I felt it. A cold, dead hand closed around my ankle. I choked on a scream. My body jolted as something gripped me. Those jagged fingernails pressed against the fabric of my scrub pants. The air rippled in an electric wash. The sensation of static snapped against my skin. I turned in a single heaving motion and ran. The kennel door gave way beneath my shoulder, and I burst into the hallway, feet pounding against the tile. Behind me, I heard the kennel door smash open. The sound of paws, heavy and fast, hitting the ground. He was coming. I sprinted blindly through the dark, running my fingers along the wall as I searched for the end of the hallway. When I reached it, my fingers scraped against the smooth wood. For a time, completely unable to find a knob, a latch, my fingers graced only an endless surface. Paws pounded closer behind me. I swear I heard more than just one set of them. It almost sounded like a quiet herd. There was no growling, no snarling, no warning, just the rush of movement in the dark. A silent freight train barreling toward me. So, I spun, pressing my back against the door. The darkness beyond was absolute, thick, and suffocating. The emergency exit sign glowed faint above me, swallowing the building in a weak neon glow. The slap of paws on tile stopped. Then I saw the faint outline of a hunched beast. A panther crouched behind brush, seeking out its prey. Breathing filled the void, slow, wet, and thick with malice. Then, a whisper of movement. So close, I felt the air shift around my face. I turned and bolted down the hall. Instinct drove me forwards. Without thought or plan, my body simply moved on its own accord. I reached my locker, yanked it open, hands scrambling for my purse. The air shifted, a weight pressed close. I felt it before I saw it. A swirling black hole yawning open behind me. My fingers closed around cold metal, the grip of my handgun. I turned and I raised the barrel towards the faint figure I could make out in the darkness. And I fired. The first shot lit up the hall like a camera flash. In that brief flicker, I saw him, that snarling grin. The second shot, the third. His body jerked, but he didn't fall. My ears buzzed with each concussive shot. In the green shimmer of the exit sign, I saw that his lips were still curled back in that awful rictus. The sixth and final shot hit its mark. The left side of his skull caved inward, the muzzle of his face blown apart where the bullet had exited. Even in the thin light, I saw how his jaw sagged open, how that tongue flopped out limp. And even as he fell, his head twitched. A violent, unnatural snap of movement. A thick, wet pop echoed. He swayed. Then, finally, he collapsed in a heap all at once. I stood there, gun trembling in my hands, ears ringing, the darkness still pulsing around me, thick and heavy, pressing in from all sides. Then, footsteps. Shouts, voices, someone grabbed my arm, yanking me back. The lights flickered, buzzed, then flared back to life. And for the first time, I saw what I had done. One shot had buried itself in the tile. The rest had hit him. Mutt lay on his side, his head a ruin of blood and bone. His chest rose once, twice. Then he went still. The bite muzzle was missing. He must have pulled it off somewhere during the chase. I didn't move. The hospital swarmed with police. I don't know who called them or when, but they arrived fast. A slew of questions. I registered almost nothing in my haze. They took me into the back office, my hands still shaking, my ears still filled with phantom echoes. I knew exactly what I had to say. I knew how to frame it. Self-defense. My Uncle Philip was a defense attorney. He talked shop often with me on our fishing trip outings together. So I knew a little more than I let on, and I managed to play my part well. And so, the police let me go. We wrapped, bagged, and stuffed Mutt in the freezer, awaiting cremation. And I took time off work, spent a few days in silence, trying to erase the memory of that voice. Tried to ignore that palpable sound of my name in some twisted, malformed mouth. As you likely imagined, it didn't work. The phone rang on the morning of my scheduled return to work. It was a blocked number. Part of me knew the call was coming, as irrational as that sounds, and so I answered. Slow, shaky breathing filled the line. Then he began to laugh, like everything that had happened to me was a hilarious joke. Low, drawling, thick with something I couldn't name. Maybe it was a mouthful of tobacco chew. You shouldn't have killed it, little lady.
Keaton. His voice slithered through the speaker, curling like a snake around my spine. His laughter built, rising, filling the silence.
You gonna make things so much worse.
And as the laughing turned into hollering, the line clicked dead. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, staring up at nothing. His words weighing down the air. Gone and made things so much worse. My first thought was confusion. How did he get my number? My second thought was frantic. Those words struck a chord deep inside my marrow. He said I'd made things worse, and for some reason, deep in the pit of my soul, I believed him. Part 2. It started with a dog, or rather, something wearing a dog's skin. I thought I was doing the right thing when I put it down. But now, something far worse is stalking me. I had to clean up a few things first. The worst of it was the euthazol I used on Mutt. On my first day back, I staged an accident. I dropped the bottle and let it shatter across the floor. It complicated the logs, but it worked. I'm not proud of it. You shouldn't be either. But at the time, it felt like the only option. I was wrong. My first day back, after a hiatus at home, I noticed that Mutt was still in the freezer. His frozen paws had torn through the tough plastic bag, carving grooves into the ice crystals, growing like miniature spears along the inside of our freezer. I didn't tell anyone his body had moved. That sick feeling rose in my chest again as I stuffed him into 3 more layers of bags. If you aren't familiar with the bags we in the veterinary field use after pets pass away, they're made from high-density polyethylene or polyvinyl chloride. They're tough, thicker than sin. It's uncommon for paws to break through the plastic. But Mutt was never ordinary. I think it was a final fuck you. And, well, right back at you, Mutt. Since Keaton wasn't picking up the tab, I offered to cover the cremation costs. I wanted those ashes in an urn. For some reason, that felt important. Something bigger than myself. Something I couldn't explain. I didn't feel relieved when they hauled Mutt's body bag away with the 2 other dogs I'm convinced died because of him. I kept hearing Keaton's words ringing in my ear.
You've gone and made things so much worse. His southern molasses drawl, mocking, laughing. A sick bastard. The clinic seemed to calm down at first, at least for a couple of days. I began to relax. Angie, my coworker and friend, approached me.
Did you hear how Ryan did it?
I shook my head, quieter than usual, trying to show her I wasn't interested.
Part of me blames myself for his death. I know how irrational it sounds, but the human mind is a sinister thing. Grief doesn't care about logic. It only cares about consuming, taking, destroying. She continued. He stabbed himself with a letter opener. My cousin works as a highway patrol officer. He got all the details on it. It's horrible, Allison. He stabbed himself so many times. Please, stop. I can't.
The tears were already welling in my eyes.
She reached out a hand to comfort me, but I brushed past it and locked myself in the bathroom. I spent 10 minutes gripping the sink, struggling to steady my breathing. The rest of the shift passed without incident. It was monotonous and calmer than it had been since I shot Mutt in the hallway. Angie was working a back-to-back double that night, something that had unfortunately become more common in recent years as our clinic struggled with chronic understaffing. They asked if I could cover another shift too, but I said no. After everything I'd seen, everything I'd done, there weren't enough sane pieces of me left to give. That night, I settled into bed, my gun tucked under my pillow. The trailer was quiet, just the sound of wind outside, a high-pitched whooshing that rattled the windows every so often. But I found it almost soothing. As I lay there, closing my eyes, I saw it. A snarling, statuesque, black Rottweiler. Eyes like two bottomless pits. He moved through the trailer toward me, his presence a creeping weight in the dark. Then I looked down. Instead of paws, he had 4 pale hands, their flesh blending seamlessly into the black fur of his limbs. He strode forward. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body locked up, frozen in place as he slunk beneath the foot of my bed. I tried to open my eyes to wake up from this nightmare, but they were open, and I wasn't sleeping. A hand rose over the mattress edge. Another followed. I felt the weight of them pressing down, the mattress sinking beneath an unseen force. It felt so real, too real. Then the snout emerged, slow and deliberate, rising above the sheets like a shark breaking the surface of the ocean. It drained the room of anything good, anything right. Only the ache of loneliness remained, a gnawing darkness spreading through me. I felt like I was sinking into a bottomless pit, falling endlessly. The stench of rotten meat filled my nostrils, the grinning maw loomed inches from my lips. Eyes burned into mine, wide and unblinking. A string of drool pressed against the skin of my neck. The mouth began to open, yawning. Each serrated edge gleamed in the moonlight, lining the jaws in jagged, overlapping rows. The clicking of bone filled the silence as the jaw pried open past natural limits, tendons slipping and joints straining. It kept widening, the gaping maw stretching farther than anything human or animal should be able to. Hot, damp breath washed over my face. My teeth clenched. The mouth inched forward, slowly and deliberate, savoring the moment. Every nerve in my body screamed to move, to fight, but I was frozen, paralyzed beneath the weight of its presence. The gaping maw hovered inches above my face, the serrated edges of its jaws twitching in anticipation. I could see the glistening sinew stretching as the jaws prepared to snap shut, feeling the unbearable heat of its breath seeping into my skin. A low, guttural growl rumbled from deep within its throat, vibrating through the mattress, through me. My pulse pounded against my temples. drowning out everything but the sound of that grinding, clicking jaw. Then, my phone rang. The sudden chime shattered the moment, a blinding flash of light flooding the room. The weight lifted in an instant. The monstrous shape dissolved like mist, vanishing into the shadows, as if it had never been there. I was moving before I realized it, gasping for air, clutching my chest. My heart hammered within me like the hooves of a warhorse, my limbs trembling as I scrambled upright, searching the darkness for any lingering sign that it had truly gone. Had I experienced sleep paralysis? Something worse? I heard my trailer door slam shut. I picked up the phone and flicked on the lamp by my bed. I heard a loud, wailing siren and the sound of wind on the other line. My eyes were too blurry with tears to read the contact name.
Oh, Allison. Fuck. Check the news.
It was Dr. Harkham. He sounded out of breath. I grabbed my remote and flicked on the television and thumbed it to a local news station. Dr. Harkham breathed heavy in the background. We're here on the scene of what is now suspected to be an incident of arson. Firefighters struggling to put out the blaze, although they stopped it from spreading to nearby buildings.
I felt the world glaze over.
I watched a team of yellow-clad firefighters picking through the cinders of my old workplace. God, half the roof was slumped in. The place was licked with flames. I recognized little pieces of a much larger puzzle, smashed and burned. I still clutched the phone to my head as I watched the firefighters pick through the ruins of an intimate part of my life. It was gone, just like Ryan.
Angie, she didn't make it out.
Dr. Harkham choked out a sob. A man who I'd worked with for years and had never seen shed a tear before began sobbing on the other line. This was a 60-something ranching vet who didn't take shit from anyone. A man carved out of the New Mexico dirt, tougher than the rest of us, and he was crying. I steeled myself, choking back my tears. Angie had been a friend, closer than Ryan. She'd burned to death in that building.
What happened? Tell me everything,
I said, forcing down the swell of emotion.
I think it was that creepy bastard. That blonde motherfucker Keaton. We were working the shift when a container of gasoline with a lit rag was tossed through the back window into the doctor's office. It engulfed the place in flames in seconds. We lost some patients, too.
His voice wavered, struggling to stay steady.
I don't know who would do that. Why? What did we ever do to that inbred piece of shit? So senseless. God, I told the police everything.
This was beyond them, beyond what the police could understand. I'd sound insane if I told them everything. Even after I'd blown Mutt's jaw apart, I had omitted so much from my statement. Keaton didn't need a motive. He felt like it was ancient, a force of chaos that existed only to sow pain and reap harvest of blood. He didn't need a reason, Doc. Not to drop off that monster, not to burn down our clinic. He wants us to suffer. He wanted to watch us die. Dr. Harkham was silent for a moment, my words hitting him like a blow.
I have to go,
he finally said.
The police need a more detailed statement. Be safe, Allison.
The line went dead. Another victim, Angie, gone. Another life swallowed by the plague of tragedy I couldn't begin to understand. My hand trembled, not only from the horror of what I'd experienced, but from the weight of everything I'd lost, from the thought of Ryan's brutal self-destruction. Some creeping apocalypse had wandered into my life, and it was clear now it intended to stay. I couldn't sleep again. I didn't even try. My phone buzzed with texts from friends, family. One missed call stood out. My old friend, Joe. Navajo Joe, we used to call him, always with a grin. He'd just laugh, that handsome, tough son of a bitch. I should have called them all back immediately, but I had other, more pressing things to do first. I gathered my belongings, flipped open the cylinder of my revolver, and loaded a cartridge into each chamber. The compact 9mm felt solid in my grip, its matte finish worn smooth from years of use. Despite its small frame, the steel carried weight, reassuring and steady. I tossed a couple of ammo boxes into my purse, the rounds light but lethal, their copper-jacketed tips catching the dim glow of my bedside lamp. From the top of my cabinets, I pulled down an old wooden cigar box. Inside was a couple $1,000s I'd stashed away for emergencies. If this wasn't an emergency, I didn't know what was. I sat on the porch of my trailer, a cigarette pinched between my fingers, watching the sun claw its way over the horizon. Smoke curled into the air, twisting in the breeze, vanishing into nothing. By the time morning fully arrived, I'd burned through the whole pack. I checked my watch. The crematorium would be opening soon. They'd taken Mutt's body a couple of days ago. I needed to convince them to put Mutt at the top of the cremation list. My old Buick truck started with a low rumble, the engine purring to life. A gift from my late father. It had been his pride and joy. I reached up to adjust the rearview mirror and froze. A spiked black collar hung from it, tags jingling softly as I brushed against them. Mutt. And below that, Keaton's number. I recognized it immediately. The same one we tried calling at the clinic when he abandoned that thing on us. Not a dog, a thing. Where my fingers touched the collar, a biting chill crackled against my skin, like dry ice burning on contact. I rolled down the window and flung it into the scrub brush. It didn't make me feel any better. He had gotten it back. I'd placed it in the cremation bag with Mutt, but somehow it was here, which meant he'd been here, inside my car, inside my home. Maybe that thing in my trailer hadn't been Mutt at all. Maybe it had been Keaton. Mutt was just the beginning, and this was spiraling into a situation I couldn't contain. At least, not alone. I pulled out of my small patch of land, kicking up a flurry of red dust. My air conditioner hummed, my fingers drummed against the steering wheel. 30 minutes later, I pulled up to the animal crematorium, a sunken gray cement building casting a wide shadow in the heat haze. I stepped out and tried the door handles. Locked. I pressed the doorbell and heard a faint jingle inside, but the lights were off. I checked my phone and swore under my breath. I'd been so lost in my own thoughts I'd completely forgotten it was a federal holiday. No one was inside. Veterinary clinics contract with crematoriums, sending euthanized pets in sealed black bags. We store them in freezers until the company's van arrives to collect them. They're packed alongside animals from other clinics, then stored in even larger freezers at the crematorium until it's their turn for processing. It can take weeks to complete a cremation, but Mutt had only been here for a few days. And somehow, I could feel him inside the building, like I was standing too close to a live wire. The offshoot road I'd followed was empty. In the distance, I could see the glimmer of traffic, but it was far enough away that no one would witness what I was about to do. I circled the building, checking for an alarm system. Nothing. Peering through the windows, I scanned the interior. No cameras either. Crematoriums aren't exactly prime targets for thieves. Nothing to protect except frozen animal corpses. At the back, I found a window. Above me, only miles of empty blue sky. The air still, except for a faint breeze curling through the scrub. I crouched and picked up a stone the size of my palm from its resting place beside a cactus, weighing it in my hand. Then, I hurled it through the glass. The window shattered unevenly, jagged shards left clinging to the frame like teeth. I found a stick nearby and used it to knock away the worst of them before pulling myself up and climbing through. Glass crunched beneath my boots as I landed inside. The rock I'd thrown had skidded across the floor, coming to rest far across the room. The space before me stretched out like a cavernous warehouse. To my left, 4 massive crematorium units, metal doors dull in the dim light. To my right, an entire wall of freezer units stood silent and still. Steel girders loomed overhead, casting long, skeletal shadows against the walls. It felt like I had walked into a place I wasn't meant to be, like intruding in a place that had been waiting for me. The silence wrapped around me, thick and uncertain. My heartbeat thumped against my ribs, steady but insistent, like a distant war drum. Behind me, the wind whistled through the broken window. Then, the smell hit me. The thick, sickly stench of rot, like a corpse left too long in the sun. Its hollowed skin splitting open, brimming with writhing black flies. The air crackled with the sound of unseen maggots popping and shifting. A sudden thump made me jerk toward the freezer. One of the lids lifted, then fell with a hollow clunk. I watched, my breath caught in my throat, as the white top rose and dropped again, like a mouth opening and closing. Then another freezer began knocking against itself, and another. Then they all started. The sound grew into a chaotic, discordant symphony. The freezers shuddered, vibrating against the floor, scraping and twisting from their original positions. Then, all at once, the room fell still. Silence dawned. Then, with a deafening crash, the first freezer that had started thumping was hurled 10 feet across the floor. It flopped onto its side, metal screeching as it scraped across the concrete, body bags spilling out from the burst seam. It slammed into one of the crematorium units, the impact tearing the freezer door clean off. The lid skidded across the floor, crashing into the wall with a metallic clang. And in the middle of the wreckage lay the triple-bagged corpse I recognized all too well. Mutt. His body was rigid, frozen stiff inside the thick layers of plastic. The paws pressed outwards, twitching. I heard bones grinding, joints twisting, a sickening sound of something forcing itself to move when it shouldn't. The stiff limbs pushed against the plastic like a baby kicking from inside the womb. I felt eyes on me, burning pupils watching from behind, shadows stretched and shifted in my periphery. But I couldn't take my gaze off the thing in front of me. The dog I had shot, the one with the caved-in skull, the one I'd pumped full of euthanasia solution, the one that had been locked in a freezer for days. I spotted a square-point shovel leaning against one of the cremation units, caked in ash. I grabbed it, feeling the rough handle bite into my palm, and charged forward. I swung it down with all the force I could muster. The first strike split the thick plastic, sending frozen chunks of flesh spraying across the floor. Mutt's ruined head tumbled free. His frost-glazed eyes caught the dim light, and his shattered lower jaw smacked against the concrete, twitching. It was too frozen to bite, too stiff to do anything but thrash in mindless, spasmodic movements. My pulse thundered in my ears. The wind outside howled through the broken window, its pitch rising into something shrill, almost human. The shadows behind me deepened. I swung again. The shovel blade carved through tendons, severing the spine at the neck. The paws inside the torn body began spasming, clawing at nothing. I kept going, hacking away at the frozen flesh until the head detached completely with a final, sickening crunch. The wind howled louder, but I could sense that it wasn't only the wind behind me anymore. I turned. Keaton. He loomed in the broken window, impossibly tall, his body twisted to fit through the jagged frame. One hand gripped the windowsill, fingers digging into the crumbling concrete, the other obscured in the shadows. His filthy blonde hair hung limp over a face that wasn't quite human. His neck stretched forward, grotesquely elongated.
the vertebra bulging beneath thin, sallow skin. It didn't just extend, it coiled, folding over itself like an accordion, fluid yet wrong in every conceivable way. The angle of it made my stomach twist. His eyes were red, raw pools of blood where the whites should have been, and they pinned me in place. The pupils were black, dull, the color of tarnished coins left to rot in the dirt. He inhaled slow and deep, dragging in the air like he was tasting it. And then his lips split apart, curling into a grin that stretched too wide, splitting cheek to cheek, as if his skin could barely contain it. His chest heaved, a silent laugh rippling through him. And his head, God, his head was so much closer than it should have been. His clicking, sinuous neck had stretched impossibly far into the room, casting a long, warped shadow that swallowed the space between us. Mutt's body writhed behind me, flopping against the concrete like a fish without a head. The sickening smacks echoed through the cavernous room, each one more desperate, more wrong. I backed away from Keaton, slowly and deliberate, my pulse hammering in my ears. He didn't speak. He just breathed, deep and slow, savoring the moment, drinking in my fear like it was a red wine. The wind whispered through the broken window, stirring the air between us. Then his other arm rose, unnatural in its movement, the elbow joint clicking as it bent at a disturbing angle. His hand curled around something, lifting it up like a prize. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. A dark, matted thing, limp and swaying slightly. Then I saw how his fingers had sunk into it. His middle and ring fingers were buried deep in gaping eye sockets, his thumbs screwed into the crown of the head like he was gripping a bowling ball. The realization hit me like the blare of a car horn on a pitch-black road. A head. A human fucking head. The jaw hung slack, twisting from side to side with every minute shift of Keaton's grip. Blood clung to the torn skin in slick, wet strands. I knew that face. Dr. Harkham. The breath hitched in my throat, and I staggered back without thinking. A mistake. White, hot pain seared through my calf. A vice clamped down on my leg. My brain scrambled to catch up with what had just happened. I looked down. Matt's severed head clamped onto my ankle, his mangled jaw looking in place. Torn flesh barely held the structure together, but the grip was unrelenting. Teeth buried deep. Pain flared through my leg, hot and immediate, the pressure tightening like a rusted bear trap. Keaton laughed. The sound curdled the air, high-pitched and jagged, warbling between something human and something that had never been. His entire body quivered with the force of it, his grotesquely long neck arched like a bridge, vertebra rippling beneath stretched, paper-thin skin. The ridges of his spine pressed outward, shifting unnaturally, jutting like knuckles ready to crack. I swung the shovel down on Mutt's head, the impact shuddering through my arms. His jaws only clamped tighter, and I felt a fresh rush of warmth as blood trickled into my boots. Gritting my teeth, I pried at the head like opening a clamshell, peeling it from my leg. I took a strip of fabric and flesh with it as it crashed to the floor. Snarling, I wedged the shoe between its upper and lower jaw, pressing down with my full weight. Bones splintering, the jaw cracking apart with a sickening pop as the lower half disconnected completely. Keaton howled with laughter. It was a riot to him. He shook with it, body convulsing, that awful neck writhing like a snake. I swung the shovel sideways, aiming straight for his grinning face, but before it could land, his neck snapped back, recoiling too fast, retreating into the night. The shovel flew from my hands, clattering against the wall with a metallic clang. He lingered in the window, looming, watching, waiting. Shouldn't have killed her. You started something you can't finish, little miss. Should've let it fade until it was done. then I'd have picked it up. His voice rasped like a snake's hiss, slithering into the space between us. His head retracted, impossibly smooth, that too long neck drawing back into the night. His hand peeled from the windowsill, talons scraping against the concrete, leaving behind deep gouges in the stone. Behind me, the thrashing body stilled. Silence settled, thick and suffocating. I didn't dare turn around. Not yet. I braced myself, waiting for the inevitable, for Keaton to slip back in through some unseen opening, to drive those jagged fingernails into my spine, to tear into me with his yellowed, animalistic teeth. But nothing came. My breath left me in a shudder. My body screamed for me to move, but the lingering presence of him made my muscles coil tight, every nerve waiting for the strike that never landed. Finally, I forced myself to turn. Mutt's body lay still. Whatever had been animating it, twisting it into something beyond death, was gone now. For good, I hoped. I limped toward the nearest cremation retort, my leg throbbing with every step, my hands trembling as I fidgeted with the loading door. It clunked open, the hinges groaning, and I slid the roller tray out. Mutt's head went in first, his detached lower jaw following. His body came next, heavier than it should have been, dead weight sinking into the metal. The pain in my leg flared, sending hot sparks of agony shooting up my thigh, but I bit down against the pain and shoved him all the way inside. Fumbling with the control panel, I pressed the buttons, praying I got the right sequence. The burners roared to life, the chamber flickering with searing orange light. Heat pulsed outward, warming my skin as the fire licked at the corpse. I staggered away, limbs shaking, and made my way to the office break room. The drawers rattled as I tore them open, my hands shaking too much to be precise. Gauze, scissors, bandages. I grabbed everything I could, then hobbled back to the retort. Collapsing behind it, I pried off my boot, wincing as blood trickled onto the floor. The sock beneath was soaked, the fabric clinging to my skin. I exhaled deeply, then reached for the scissors, snipping my pant leg above the wound before peeling it away. The damage was worse than I thought. Blood pooled in the puncture wounds, the torn flesh already darkening with bruises that spread outward like shockwaves from each ragged tear. My calf throbbed in time with my pulse, sharp bursts of pain radiating up my leg. The bites might have been deep enough for stitches, but I didn't have time for that. The jeans had saved me from the worst of it, though the shredded fabric clung to my skin, soaked through. I pressed gauze against the wounds, wincing as fresh blood welled against the white cotton. I wrapped a compression bandage around my leg, tight enough to slow the bleeding, but not enough to cut circulation. Antibiotics or lidocaine would have been a blessing. I could have stitched it myself if I had to, but a crematorium didn't exactly keep medical supplies on hand. I leaned my head back against the wall, exhaling through clenched teeth. My ears rang from the heat, the exhaustion, the pain. And then I heard it. A scream. Distant, warped, twisting through the air like the high-pitched wail of logs splitting in a fire. I turned toward the retort viewing window. Inside, Mutt's body writhed as the flames engulfed him. The hairs curled first, blackening before catching fire. The flesh peeled away in layers. His limbs twitched, shuddering, the last vestiges of unnatural life refusing to die easily. The stench of burning fur and charred meat turned my stomach. I forced myself to watch as the thing that had haunted me was reduced to nothing more than a skeletal frame. Eventually, there was nothing left but black soot clinging to the glass. The steady hum of the cremation unit filled the room. I let the heat seep into my bones before finally pushing myself upright, limping toward the control panel to shut everything down. By the time the retort had cooled enough to retrieve the remains, the sun was sinking below the horizon, the sky smeared with a hue like burnt orange. Keaton hadn't come back. Yet.
I grabbed a shovel and a garbage bag. The retort's door groaned open, and I scooped out the calcined bones, brushing away the brittle black remains until all that remained was pale dust. One by one, I fed the remains into the cremulator. The machine whirred, grinding the fragments down until every last piece of mutt fit into a bag just slightly larger than my hand. I stood there for a long time, gripping the bag in my blood-stained hands. Keaton had slunk away into the night, but I knew this wasn't over. I thought about Ryan, Angie, the dogs, my clinic reduced to nothing but cinders and ruin. I'd lost so much in just a few weeks. Too much. Half my life was gone in an instant. I felt too hollowed out to even cry. Ripped out of my life in an instant. No rhyme or reason to it. He could have killed me, easily. He was toying with me, like a cat slapping around a finch with a broken wing, each swipe landing harder than the last. Soon, I reckoned he'd start biting. I gritted through the pain as I pushed the freezer back into place, the weight of it straining against my injured leg. Plugging it back in, I reloaded it with black body bags, setting the torn-off lid back on top like a makeshift seal. The air reeked of blood and freezer burn, and of the dust blowing in from outside. I found a broom and a mop, doing what I could to clean up my blood and mutts, which had thawed into a dark, congealing slick on the floor. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Stepping outside, I checked both ways. Nothing but dirt and desert weeds stretching into the distance. The silence outside here wasn't comforting. It was heavy, pressing down like a held breath. The dread never left. Sliding into my car, I turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, sounds that grounded me, if only for a moment. I set Mutt's bag of ashes on the passenger seat, staring at it like it might start moving again. Then I saw something in the footwell. Something round, hollow sockets where fingers had pressed deep and firm. Dr. Harkham's head. A parting gift. Bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it back, forcing my breathing steady. I'd had a tough life growing up. I knew how to push things down, bury them deep. I grabbed an old jacket from the back seat and tossed it over the round heap. At least I didn't have to look at him like that anymore. Then, I did the only thing I could do. I called the one person who might be able to do something about this. The only one who might be able to pull me from the riptide I was drowning in. Joe. My buddy from high school. I hadn't talked to him in years, but I'd missed his call this morning. That had to mean something. The dirt road stretched toward the main hallway as I drove, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than they needed to. He picked up on the second ring.
Allison? Thank God.
Tears welled at the corners of my eyes.
God, Joe, it's been so long. I saw the news. I know you worked there. I had to see if you were okay.
Joe, I need to talk to you. Something's after me. It's been after me since I first saw it a few weeks ago. I need your help. A dog came into my clinic. Bad fucking luck. The thing turned the building into a slaughterhouse without so much as a blink. Silence. The joy in his voice faded, melted away like chocolate left too long in the sun. Outside, the sky burned with the last light of day, the sun dripping toward the edge of the world, flaring one final orange goodbye.
That's not just bad luck, Allison. That's something else. Something old. That's bad medicine.
Joe clicked his tongue the same way he used to. The sound hit something deep in my chest. A crack in my ribs I hadn't noticed forming until now. I should have called him sooner. Maybe things would have turned out differently. Maybe not.
You got my address? Come down to the rest. I'll make sure they let you in.
His voice was steady, familiar, safe. He gave me directions. The Navajo reservation a couple hours to the southwest.
I've got some ashes, too,
I said. My fingers tightened around the small bag beside me.
I cremated his dog, the one he brought into my clinic before all this shit went south.
Joe went quiet for a moment, then softer this time.
Not a dog.
He didn't elaborate.
Not anymore.
Sharp, blistering pain grabbed my calf. I sucked in a breath, my legs shivering, nerves screaming as if a white-hot blade had been pressed into my skin. I yelped.
Allison?
Joe's voice sharpened. The pain spread like fire, radiating from the bite wound, sinking deep. My pulse hammered as I clutched my leg, fingers pressing into the fabric of my jeans, but nothing stopped the burning. Then, from the darkness of the footwell, something shifted. A wet, gurgling croak, a jaw working. I froze. Joe must have heard it too. His breath hitched, sharp over the line. A slithering rasp crawled up from beneath the jacket I'd tossed over the thing in the footwell. The sound of dry lips parting, of a raspy voice speaking through a mouth that shouldn't be able to talk anymore. His voice. Allison. My breath stilled inside me. A hollow, empty space opened in my chest. Keaton. He was talking through lips that didn't belong to him, lips that once belonged to Dr. Harkham. The weight of his amusement pressed down on me, thick and choking. A grin curled in the dark, unseen but felt. The voice slithered through, dripping with something close to excitement beneath the folds of my jacket on the floor. I'm really starting to enjoy this game. Part 3. I drove away from that animal crematorium in a blaze of rubber. No other cars were outside, so I had no idea how Keaton had gotten there. Did he walk? I never heard a car idling or an engine starting up. The sun had set, and that made me feel a deep, seething sense of unease, like the miles of surrounding red rock and highway were out to get me, out to hurt me. Dr. Harkham's head still rolled around beneath my jacket, but the ventriloquism act had stopped. I should have tossed him out into the desert, but that didn't feel right. A man who I'd worked with and grown to care about. He had a temper, but so did I. That's why we meshed. God, his poor wife. His poor kids. I felt like Joe might know what to do with the severed head sitting in my passenger footwell. Joe had tried to call back, but I didn't pick up. I had a sneaking suspicion that Keaton was listening through Dr. Harkham's ears. I drove along a cut of dusty road for almost an hour before I saw a rest stop. I saw the needle crawling towards empty on my gas gauge. I didn't want to stop, but I had no choice if I wanted to make it to the res. I pulled off the highway and saw an old pump stop that was desolate. A single produce semi-truck sat in the parking lot near the diesel truck. The overhang lights looked like an oasis in a sea of dull black pitch. I settled into a pump and tossed a few more items of clothing down on top of where Dr. Harkham's head stayed. I heard a low, chuffing sound beneath the layers of fabric. I ignored it. I needed to focus to observe my surroundings. I stuffed Mutt's ashes into my purse alongside my pistol. I passed by a grizzled, overweight trucker sitting in his driver's seat, watching me cross the sidewalk. I wandered into the gas station and grabbed an assortment of jerkies, energy drink cans, and a steaming cup of coffee. Not road trip snacks, just things to keep me alive, thinking through the night. To keep me surviving until dawn. A scrawny, early 20s burnout sat with his feet resting up on the countertop. I could hear the sound of a movie playing through his phone speakers. He casually ate away at a bag of popcorn. The coffee tasted burnt, metallic. The lights flickered overhead like they weren't sure they wanted to be on. 40 on pump 6, I said, sliding my assortment of items across the counter. He didn't say a word, just clicked away at the register with a hand absent-mindedly. I slipped him a handful of 20s, and he tore his eyes from the phone long enough to pour change into my hand. I left without a word. I crossed below the blanket of light cast by the overhang shining down on pumps. I stopped walking when I turned over and saw that the semi-truck was empty. A wrongness crashed down around me, an all-encompassing feeling of doom. I surrendered to the feeling. I didn't walk towards the truck, didn't go to investigate. I had an idea that's what Keaton wanted me to do, what he was waiting for me to do. I kept my eye on the semi's cab, inching backwards with a bag in one hand, a coffee in the other, purse slung over one shoulder. My breath sounded pitched in the darkness, labored and heavy. I saw a glimmer of red across the inside of the semi's windshield, a glistening brush stroke. I didn't peel my eyes from the semi as I filled up my tank. As soon as I was done, I slid into my truck and started it up. The click of the locks engaging brought little to dissuade the rising tide of panic drowning me from the inside out. As I pulled around the pumps and across from the station, I saw the right side of the semi in the flash of my headlights. The cab driver's side door was cracked open, blood flung in congealed globs on black asphalt. I saw him then. Keaton. He was perched between the semi's wheels like a spider hiding beneath a rock. His limbs looked like long wooden posts stretched with a thin layer of white skin. Pinched feet held onto the underside of the trunk bed in a broken contortion. His elbows buckled in the wrong directions. Everything was so much longer than there should have been. Neck like a tangled, twisting vine. His eyes refracted the light like two glowing yellow orbs. The bite wound on my leg began to itch, then burn. I saw thin fingers of smoke clawing out of my purse, and I pulled out the warm ashes of mutt and set them on the passenger seat. I heard a faint crackle like embers in those ashes. The car began to smell like singed hair and cooking flesh. I noticed a small smile on Keaton's face, his mouth drenched in rivulets of blood. The trucker sitting in his cab earlier lay in a twisted heap beneath Keaton. The trucker's ribcage was cracked open like a crab shell. One of Keaton's sharp hands was digging around inside the man, like a woman digging around inside her purse for her keys. Keaton's stare lingered, piercing as I swung my car around, kicking up a shiver of dust, and I flipped my truck into high gear. Keaton pulled a dripping red hand out of the trucker's sucking chest cavity and began waving at me. A friendly hello. I revved up the engine, blowing down that road back onto the highway faster than I should have. It wasn't until a few minutes later that I remembered the cashier, sitting alone at his post, unaware of the broken thing feasting just outside his doors. God, I hope it didn't come after him next. I thought about calling the police. I really did. But God, I had a severed head in my car. I couldn't get involved with the police. They'd have asked for info I simply couldn't provide. The head of Dr. Harkham was letting out a long drone in the footwell as I tore forward down the highway. I sipped the coffee as the mile markers slipped past, the hum of the highway loud in the quiet. The head in the footwell let out a faint groan under the jacket. I hit Joe's name on my screen and waited. He picked up on the second ring.
Allison,
He said.
you still breathing?
Barely, I said. I can't talk long, and I can't say much. Not out loud. A beat of silence.
It's with you.
Not him, but it's listening. I brought something I probably shouldn't have. I think it hears through it.
All right,
Joe said, calm but clipped.
just talk around it. I can follow.
I'm heading your way. Should hit the basin in a couple hours, give or take.
We're setting up now.
He said.
Called in a medicine man named Daysba. He knows the old stuff. Said what you told me last night was a bad shadow. Said that thing you shot might have been a mask, not a real dog.
It wasn't a dog, I said, my voice wavering just a hint. Joe exhaled through his nose. I could picture him standing outside his truck, wind tugging at his sleeves, oiled gator skin boots kicking at the weeds.
We set the line near the arroyos. You'll see it before the road curves west. Cedar, ash, pollen. Daysba's been blessing it himself. That thing steps through, it'll feel it. Might even stop.
I'll drive through. I'll lead it in. He paused.
You sure it's still behind you?
No, I said. I'm not sure of anything except it's not done with me. His voice dropped.
Allison, If that doesn't work, we've got a backup plan. If it follows past the ridge, lead it to the trailer up on the hill. It's mine. Go in, make sure it follows, then slip out the bathroom window and shut it behind you. Locks from the outside. You won't see anyone, but we'll be in position. My cousin and I are posted nearby. Daysbo will be with us.
Good. Another silence passed between us, the kind that holds everything neither of us wanted to say. I don't know what this thing is, Joe, I said finally. But it's not a man. Not anymore.
I figured that much.
I hate that I'm leading you into this, Joe. He chuckled.
I'd do anything for you, Allie. Just hate that it took something this awful for us to reconnect.
I winced. I should have reached out sooner. But time has a way of slipping through your fingers. You sure your people are ready for this?
No one's ready for something like that. But we've dealt with worse than dogs wearing skin.
Joe? I felt a tear streak down my cheek. For the first time, it wasn't an unkindly shed tear.
I know. Just get here. We'll take care of it.
I stared at the horizon, where the last light had slipped away hours ago. The jacket in the footwell twitched, and a low, warbling breath rattled through the fabric. Listening, clicking teeth together. Soon, I said. Just keep the fire burning. I hung up. The road stretched on for miles. I fought the pull of sleep, guzzling caffeine and chewing jerky to stay alert. I was flying toward a violent conclusion. Keaton felt drawn to me, like I was his muse, and he the artist. Maybe it was because I killed Mutt. Maybe something deeper, some unseen thread tying us together. He killed my friends and co-workers. He beheaded the vet I worked for, burned down the clinic, even murdered a trucker just to send me a message. This was more than cruelty. This was personal. A few miles out from the res, I saw a wash of blue and red lights behind me, followed by the chirp of a police siren. If my sanity were a spool of thread, it was unraveling fast. This night felt like a nightmare unfolding slowly, like a dress billowing on a clothesline. I pulled calmly to the side of the highway, through my heart thudding in my chest. I kept my hands on the steering wheel and stared into the rearview mirror. The officer approached from the right, walking the shoulder with caution. He came to the passenger window and motioned for me to roll it down. I did. License and registration, please, he said in an authoritative tone. Yes, 1 second, officer. My eyes dropped to the bundle of clothes on the floor, and I forced myself to look back up at the glove box. I pulled out some crumbled insurance paperwork and my registration, then grabbed my license from my purse and handed them all over. His face stayed blank, maybe a little annoyed. He had just started walking back to his cruiser when Dr. Harkham's head began to moan, a low, drawn-out sound that grew into a wail. My heart stopped. The mood shifted instantly. The officer turned, clicked on his flashlight, and swept the beam across the truck's interior. "What's that noise?" he asked, flashing the light across the dash, the seats, the floor. The beam settled on the lump in the passenger footwell. He reached down with a gloved hand. "No, don't, please," I said, my voice cracking, panic blooming fast. If he found the head, Keaton would be the least of my problems. "Be quiet, ma'am," he snapped. With 2 fingers, he peeled back the jacket, the dirty shirt, and the jeans. He gasped when he saw the head. Eyelets, crusted in dried bone, the flesh writhing slightly, twitching on the floorboard. The head wailed louder now, 2 black, empty sockets staring up at him. "Oh, Lord have mercy. What the hell is that?" His tone shifted again, this time to fury. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle, now." I reached for my door handle and heard him unholstering his sidearm with a sharp pop. His flashlight lit up the cabin like a searchlight, held steady in his left hand. In his right, he raised a sleek, black pistol, his gloved fingers wrapped tight around the grip. "Do you have any weapons in the car?" "I have my revolver in my purse, nothing else. Officer, please listen to me." "Shut up," he snapped. "Hands laced behind your head, kneel down in front of the car." No other cars passed by. Besides the wind, it was quiet. The air shifted. Bad air. A bad omen. It smelled like dust, but beneath it was something fouler.
The reek of decay swam through the midnight breeze. The scrublands stretched for miles behind barbed-wired fences. The officer reached for his radio, but paused, listening. A low howl rose from the distance. A coyote drowning in a river. A wolf caught in a trap. There was a sound full of pain, too close, and the air around us vibrated with something uncanny. I had moved in front of the truck, obeying his commands. My feet moved without thought. I had always been pliable under authority, never one to break rules. The bushes rustled behind the officer, off to the right beyond the shoulder. He swung his light over. It landed on a figure. Long limbs, a hunched body, a neck twisted like it had broken in multiple places. He looked like a crane fly, all angular joints and stilted motion. His eyes shone like white flares in the dark. The officer's mouth fell open. He stammered, trying to speak, but only half-formed words spilled out. His hand finished drawing the sidearm, and he turned toward Keaton. Keaton remained still beneath the moonlight, crouched in the sagebrush, motionless. My body started to shake. Then he charged. He burst forward on long, pounding limbs, elbows jutting out as they absorbed the weight of his insectile body. His mouth opened wide, stretching into his neck like a twisted ribbon of pale flesh lined with thorns. He didn't run. He skittered on all fours. The officer stood in a trance. He couldn't raise his revolver. His hands trembled, belt rattling with the weight of his fear. His face had gone pale, sickly, like he'd come down with the flu. Sweat beaded on his forehead beneath the brim of his hat. His radio crackled weakly against his chest. Time froze, held in place. I wanted to speak, to move, to do anything, but my words stuck to my throat, choking me. I was frozen, too. Paralyzed by the sight of something that monstrous. Somewhere behind me, Dr. Harkham's head began laughing. Keaton was a rolling twister of violence, like staring into an oncoming hurricane, feet glued to the ground. Violence incarnate. He vaulted the railing in a single leap and crashed into the officer with terrifying force. He slammed the man's back against my passenger door so hard the entire truck shifted to the left. That broke my paralysis. I scrambled back into the truck and turned the key. My passenger window was still rolled down, and through it I saw the officer's limp body smashed against the door. His weight bent the metal with a few sharp, hollow pops. Keaton's jaw opened wide, stretching all the way to his throat, a mass of twisting yellow teeth. He was chewing through the officer's skull, tearing flesh, stripping it clean. The flashlight and pistol clattered to the pavement. Then Keaton's eyes came into view. He was chewing through the officer's skull, tearing flesh, stripping it clean. The flashlight and pistol clattered to the pavement. Then Keaton's eyes came into view, slitted, swollen, like two overripe grapes. A predator's eyes, empty, starving. I slammed the gas. The car lurched forward. Something on the officer's duty belt scraped against my paint. I felt a thud as both bodies tumbled off my truck and hit the pavement behind me. In the rear view, I saw Keaton's naked body wrapped around the officer, limbs grasping and tearing. His skin crawled with motion, like the organs inside him were alive and shifting. The flashing lights from the squad car bathed them both in red and blue. One of the cop's boots rolled into the road, its laces dragging behind like it was trying to crawl away without him. Keaton paused, then began pulling the corpse behind him, dragging it like a child pulling along a favorite blanket. When I was a few yards away, Keaton snapped his head sideways at a breakneck speed. His gaze locked directly onto the back of my truck. It was piercing, inevitable, furious, like he'd just realized I was getting away, and the rage hit him all at once. As he grew smaller in the rear view, I saw him heave the officer's body off the ground and toss it deep into the scrublands. Then he started running after me. I climbed faster and faster, 60 miles per hour. The old truck's engine began to rumble beneath me. 70. The engine groaned. I caught the sharp smell of gas fumes. Keaton was gaining. At 80, the truck shook, barely holding together as the engine roared. I burned rubber twisting onto an off-ramp, saw an oncoming car a few miles down the road. My tires nearly lost traction on the gravel, kicking up a flurry of pebbles as I fought for control. Keaton was close enough to reach out. He moved impossibly fast, loping with his long limbs and elbows tucked tight to his sides. I saw the fire burning in his eyes. He was done chasing. He wanted blood. Mine. And if he caught me, I knew he wouldn't let me go again. The ashes of mutt crackled in the passenger seat like gunpowder. The head lolled from side to side in the footwell. I felt like I was losing my mind. But between the smell of scorched ash, the reek of decay blooming around me as Keaton drew closer, and the sound of the head laughing, I knew I wasn't crazy. This was all real, raw, and wrong. The box I had been stuffing all these impossibilities into was overflowing now. What happens when the box breaks? Would my mind break too? I passed through the arroyos and toward the toll booth borders of this part of the res. The barrier bars were lifted. Was this where the line had been drawn? Could Keaton cross it? He was halfway up the roadside, nearly level with the side of my truck. He wasn't looking ahead. His neck was twisted toward me, his body pounding forward with a mindless kind of purpose. His mouth hung open, eyes wide. Behind me, Dr. Harkham's head shouted with laughter. The engine rattled with speed. Keaton was so close I could smell death. I could see the dried blood of so many victims caked across his twisted, nude body like a suit of crimson armor. Right as I crossed the border barricade, Keaton veered sharply to the left. I watched him clear the fence and crash down in a heap, thrashing on his back like an insect, arms curled toward the sky. The head stopped laughing. The ashes stopped crackling. I slammed the brake pedal to the floor. Keaton writhed. I saw Joe's trailer on the left, half swallowed in dust, lit by the hard glare of floodlights. I focused the headlights on him. His thrashing slowed, then stilled. My tires thumped over uneven ground as I crept forward, heart burning like a live wire. I stomped the gas, aiming to crush him beneath the weight of the truck, but he leapt at the last second, sprawling across the roof and smashing through the back windshield in a burst of glass. I flung the car into reverse. One tire crunched over his leg. For the first time, I saw pain in Keaton's eyes in the rear view. I clenched my teeth until my jaw ached. Keaton clung to the frame, screeching. He yanked and pulled, his foot pinned like a plank beneath the tire. I slammed into drive. He flew backwards off of the car, his limbs bending and snapping like a brittle branch. As I climbed toward the hill, I saw him rise again on all fours. One leg was twisted into broken segments, the foot dragging unnaturally across the dirt. And still, he came after me. But now, there was a break in his stride. He was slower. He was wounded. And if it bleeds, it can die. At least, I hoped so. I rounded the rise. The area was desolate, not a soul in sight. I hoped that was part of the plan. I prayed it was. I slid my car into park on the ridge and pulled the parking brake. Behind me, I heard the pounding of hands on earth, getting closer with every second. Keaton landed on my roof with a thud, the metal buckling under his weight. Then, he threw himself forward, vaulted over the hood, and smeared blood across the windshield as he rolled and hit the ground. He stood, facing me, with those reptile eyes, blocking the way to the trailer. Its door was wide open. I pulled the gun from my purse and pointed it at him. He tilted his head, and I felt my muscles tense. I wasn't pulling the trigger. Something inside of me was pulling against it. I fired once. The bullet missed him entirely and buried itself into the trailer wall. Keaton charged. I dropped the pistol and ran around the car. He roared as his broken ankle slammed against the dirt. He scrambled onto the roof again, and I ducked to avoid a swipe from his hand. The spot where Mutt had bitten my ankle throbbed, and the pain lit sparks behind my eyes as I flexed and pushed through. The body will break itself to escape death, and the mind, drowning in adrenaline, becomes a weapon. But he was feeling it too. The adrenaline. His nervous system was short-circuiting. His mouth opened like a wilted flower, tongue flickering through the air. He was tasting something. Could he smell Joe? The others? Were they near? He leapt, and I dove through the trailer doorway. One of his claws raked against my back. I shoved past a floral couch, knocked pans off a shelf in the narrow kitchen, and bolted toward the bathroom. Keaton thundered in behind me, screaming. Bitch, I'll rip your throat out. His voice scraped like rusted wire dragged across concrete, echoing down the narrow hallway. Play with the insides, eat them. The trailer rocked under Keaton's weight, metal hinges groaning. I slammed the bathroom door behind me and scrambled for the open window. My foot knocked over a toothbrush and a tube of paste as I shoved myself through. Pain flared against my back. The wound of my calf throbbed. Keaton was almost on me. I could feel his heat, the hate radiating off of him. The door splintered just as I dove. My teeth cracked against desert stone when I hit the ground. A burst of white light exploded behind my eyes, and blood filled my nose, hot and thick. Something moved past me, fast, silent. I heard the window slam shut. Arms wrapped around my torso and dragged me away from the trailer, around to the front of my car. Keaton's voice roared from the inside, a storm of curses and blasphemy. He screamed like a trapped coyote, cornered and caged. He'd sensed something was off, but he couldn't help himself. His bloodlust had outpaced his instincts. Now, he was trapped. I turned my face upward. The sky above the basin cracked with heat lightning. Purple veins crawled across the clouds. The air buzzed with insect calls and owl cries. The desert had awakened, and it seemed to know what was coming. A man I didn't recognize moved past me, wearing a bandolier of bundled sage and carrying a rawhide pouch that smelled of cedar and cornmeal. He approached the trailer with quiet purpose, opened my trunk door, and retrieved the bundle of Mutt's ashes and the shrouded head of Dr. Harkham. With steady precision, he placed them both through a window into the trailer. Another man knelt in the dirt near the rear axle. An elder in a long shirt embroidered with turquoise beads and white ochre. He began to sing in a language I didn't understand. The words were low and heavy. His voice rolled like wind through canyon crests. He poured corn pollen in a slow arc around the trailer, his movements deliberate and unwavering. The others joined in. Their chant rose from the earth like the black smoke from the trailer. The song was older than Keaton, older than the desert. Then came the drumbeat, deep and rhythmic. A taunt deer-eyed stretched over a cedar frame, struck in time with the chanting. Inside the trailer, Keaton's limbs thrashed. A hand burst through the kitchen window, blistered and cracking. His skin was changing, splitting, leaking. Joe stood nearby, rifle leveled, his breath slow and focused. The bullets he fired were ceremonial, silver cast and marked with ash and pollen, each one struck with meaning. Keaton screamed like something dying. His voice scraped against the trailer's walls as flames began to rise from underneath. The tinder placed below had caught. Smoke coiled into the night sky, carrying something foul and wrong. The fire grew, hungry and bright, fed not only by gasoline, but by intention, by design. Keaton howled as the medicine circle tightened around him. His bleeding eyes gleamed through the flicker of flame, filled with disbelief and fury. He clawed at the walls, tried to find the door, but it had been sealed from the outside with rawhide bindings and sacred paint. He scratched at the windows, too narrow for his spider-like frame to slip through. The chanting never stopped, even when the trailer began to cave inward, even when the screams turned wet and animal. The fire consumed. The wind shifted. I watched Keaton stop fighting. I saw his flesh pock, blister, rupture, and burn. He looked at me through the window the same way Mutt had, with those vacant, unreadable eyes. Keaton sucked up lungfuls of empty breath. Joe watched his home burn to embers. For me, there wasn't a trace of regret in his expression. Only that same ruthless, focused anger. I spit blood through my cracked lips.
And then, the world went quiet. No birds, no insects, not even coyotes, no Keaton, not anymore. Only the breath of the desert and the low hum of thunder threading the sky. We stood and watched the trailer's shell glow red, then crumble. Joe's cousins moved through the sagebrush with extinguishers, stamping out sparks before they could catch. I didn't look away until it was dark, silent, hollow. Then I broke. Not cleanly, not quietly. My whole body shook with sobs dragged from someplace beneath grief. I screamed raw and hoarse and clung to Joe like a raft in a black ocean. He wrapped me in a musty blanket and said nothing, just held on, one hand pressed firmly to my back. I wept into the chest of his shirt. So much gone, so much taken.
It better be dead,
I said between sobs. We're going to burn the ashes of that fucker. Daysbus gonna make sure it doesn't come back. I used to believe in quiet deaths, gentle ones. That was before Mutt, before the lapping sickness that was Keaton. The world had gone still. No more chase, no more fire, no more road to burn through. Just the sound of my breath hitching, the dull ache in my limbs, and the weight of deep grief settled into my bones.
Thank you for listening and delving with me into the dark together.
Please remember to leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you feel so inclined. The more engagement this video gets, the more YouTube will push my content to others.
Thus, the following will grow.
All stories read in this channel will be available on Spotify, iTunes, and just about everywhere else. Links in the description.
Thank you for listening and feeding the cause. We'll be seeing you